Meanwhile, while driving in Canada, in 2017, we took a 16-day road trip that pretty much looked like the borders of a decent-sized country. We went to Plains, Montana, Glacier National Park, Cardston, Alberta, Calgary, Alberta, Banff National Park through Jasper National Park, a long drive from Jasper to Kamloops for a quick overnight stay, and over towards Vancouver, British Columbia before heading back home. If you've never had a chance to visit any of those areas, we highly recommend it as soon as you can. It's some of the most beautiful scenery nature has to offer, and the adventures are nearly endless, with so many trails to hike, scenic overlooks to stop at, and long, beautiful drives along the way. Our first area was in Plains, Montana, where the sky is big, the trains are long, and my dad's place was tiny. So we camped out in his back field. Oh, and the old jail is small too. The National Bison Range is a vast area just east of Plains and northwest of Missoula, where the bison can roam freely, or just stand there, or just lie around. And let the deer eat all the food. Whatever. I could easily conquer their realm, but I don't think they'd care. Clark Fork River is great for a float trip on a hot summer day, and you can do whatever this is. And get huckleberry shakes when that's all done. After we left Plains, we headed northeast to Glacier National Park. First stop for most travelers is to Apgar at the southwest end of Lake McDonald. When you visit Glacier, it's important to know, so you know what this was made with, or this guy might get mad, but it certainly wasn't these two, who go on all our adventures with us. Glacier, and you'll see later in Waterton and Banff, have beautifully clear water. It's freezing, even in the summer, but it's worth it, with plenty of room for kayaking and boating. We headed over to hike the Johns Lake Trail to, well, Johns Lake. As you can see here, there are a few short hikes to the Sacred Dancing Cascade and over to McDonald Falls. The cascade itself comes roaring down before settling out into Lake McDonald, where you can even get a bit of fishing in. For us, we headed back towards Apgar and over to Fish Creek Campground. After a quick setup of camp and some dinner, our oldest had this to say.
I was the one that came up with the idea to look at the stars while we sleep, because it's just like, who wouldn't want to look at the stars while they sleep, right?
The next day was a further trip towards Logan Pass. It's an incredible drive. This is a bit of what it's like, but of course this doesn't do it justice. You really do need to see it for yourself. Even with traffic going by you when you stop at a turnout, you still get to enjoy the sights and sounds of everything around you. Partway up to Logan Pass is the Weeping Wall, which is easier to stop at when you're heading back west toward Apgar, which is what we did. When it's hot out, it makes for an excellent stop to get out and cool off while it rains down on you. Look at us, getting rained on.
The Weeping Wall.
Why is it crying so much, though?
Pitter patter.
Drip, drip, drop, July showers.
Mama's getting wet.
Yeah. The Weeping Wall.
We went to Logan Pass twice, once on our first full day at Glacier, and again on our way out on our third day there. The first trip was mainly to the visitor center and short distances around it. Naturally, there are a lot of places to pull over and view the mountains around you and go on short hikes to waterfalls, many of which are right next to the road and easy to get out and enjoy. And after all that, an obligatory stop to get ice cream back in Apgar. The next day was that trip back to Logan Pass, where we went on a hike to Hidden Lake. Turns out that it's not so hidden, and there must be a story behind why this is called Bear Hat Mountain. Along the way, there are plenty of mountain goats, which you'll find staring at you, sitting in the shade, or cooling off by playing in the snow. It's a spunky little baby.
I know, he gets bored.
Play with me, quitter.
Jumping on his back.
Play with me. Come on, Grandpa. Let's head back. After more exploring around there, it was time to head out and make our way to St. Mary on the eastern side of Glacier, where the trees are, well, in some places, but it's certainly a lot drier and sparse on this side of the mountains. After a brief stop at the visitor center, it was time to make our way out of Glacier and towards Cardston, Alberta. But it would only be a couple more years before we were back to visit again, and since we really weren't quite done with Glacier, we wanted to head over to Mini Glacier to check it out. It was completely worth it. We were only visiting for a little while, but it was an amazingly quiet and peaceful location, perhaps because it's isolated back in the mountains with only the one road with the less populous eastern side to get to it. We'd like to take a trip back and check out the lodge and go on many of the hikes around it. From Mini Glacier, we were on our way to Cardston. The entire way, you had a great view of Chief Mountain, which is just northeast of Glacier. In Cardston, we met up with some longtime friends of ours who took us out to Waterton Lakes National Park, Cameron Lake, and Red Rock Canyon. Most of Alberta is known for its fairly flat terrain with slight rolling hills of farm fields, so it can feel like you're driving forever as the Canadian Rockies slowly creep closer and closer, which it slows down sometimes by Canadian traffic jams. Once we made it through that, we stopped at the Prince of Wales Hotel on Waterton Lakes to see what it was like. The view from it really is spectacular, but I'm okay just visiting. When I said earlier about clear water, you can see the shadow along the shallow bottom of the lake here as this guy was kayaking along. Right next to town is Cameron Falls. And just south of there is a trail to Lower Bertha Falls. We didn't hike that one, as we instead made our way over to Cameron Lake where we took in the great views from the beach there and took some dives into the water to cool off. Yep, those canoers, kayakers. After that, we went to Red Rock Canyon, which seems a bit out of place, but is a wonderful contrast to the surrounding terrain that centuries of work by the water revealed its beauty. It's quite an amazing hike through it. After spending more time with friends and before leaving Cardston a few days later, we visited the Cardston, Alberta Temple and the Remington Carriage Museum. Sadly, we did not have room to take one home with us. After Cardston, we headed north to Calgary. The drive up and exploring Calgary was as clear as we had been seeing so far on this trip, but we soon found out about the fires that had been raging in British Columbia that were filling the sky with smoke. But we deal with that later, because the Calgary Stampede was going on. Naturally, there were animals, walls to color, jet flyovers with F-18s, but they had their own name for them, and who knew there were dog shows and trampoline dunk competitions. We didn't make it to any rodeo events or stagecoach races, but the Calgary Stampede is a big deal around there, so you can actually watch those on TV. However, we did get to have our own tractor races. And since our little campers at the time were doing such a great job on the trip, we treated them to a hotel with an indoor water slide. We also stopped by the Calgary, Alberta Temple, where we got to do some service deadheading the flowers. Heading west out of Calgary, you can see the smoke filling the sky from those wildfires in British Columbia. It certainly hampered the view a lot, but it stayed high enough that we still had some great views underneath it. We arrived in Banff, where we were greeted with more Canadian traffic.
When they said horse crossing, they weren't kidding. Then the lady in the back there to pick up the poo. And away we go.
And then over to Johnston Canyon for some hiking, which has a great walkway anchored into the side of the cliff to provide great views along the way to the falls. Alright, Johnston Canyon. I think this is the lower falls, going up the trail a little more. That'd be a wild ride to go through. Lower falls in Johnston Canyon. That thing is just pouring through there. And on the way back to camp, more Canadian traffic jams. Camp itself was just northeast of Banff at Two Jack, Maine, where we camped for a couple of nights. The campsites here were wonderfully spacious that you can't even see anyone camping around us. So yeah, we're on Lake Minnewanka. That's how we think we pronounce it. And you can still see smoke from all the forest fires that are west of here. Makes it really hazy. But still, you can kind of see it's still pretty clear. After a little relaxation on the lake that morning and finding strange trees, we headed to the Cave and Basin National Historic Site to see the thermal mineral spring inside it, which is estimated to be heated from a depth of 3 kilometers. Next stop was at Moraine Lake. There's a giant rock pile there, and a trail aptly named so, and a logjam thick enough to walk across, but I wouldn't recommend doing that. The view from up there showed the mountains quite covered in smoke, but the lake still had its pristine blue water. Then it was on to Lake Louise for some exploring, a view of the chateau, a not quite as smoky view of the lake and mountains around it, and still that clear blue water of the Canadian Rockies. A fairly common behavior of visitors that we saw is that most will stop at turnouts along the road, but very few will venture far from it. So a short, easy hike to the edge of Waterfowl Lakes provided a quiet, peaceful view and a visit with a couple from the Netherlands there. It's so quiet. This is beautiful. And I couldn't really zoom in well enough with the camera. But over there is a dark spot just in the water. A couple with the binoculars said there was an elk just in the water. We continued north on Alberta Highway 93, which again, our footage here pales in comparison to the drive itself, but this should give you an idea of what to look forward to on your own trip if you ever get the chance to go. Which included more Canadian traffic jams. We had planned to go to the Columbia Icefield Skywalk when we saw a brochure about it back in Banff, but we failed to take note that it required a bus ticket out of the visitor center to the south where Banff and Jasper border each other. It was quite a ways out of our price range, but hey, it looked cool. So, on we continued. Our last stop was at Athabasca Falls, if that's how you say it. The Athabasca River. And of course the Athabasca Falls over there. There's Scott from another angle. And after that, we were on our way out of Jasper National Park towards the town of Jasper itself and heading back west into British Columbia. The drive from Jasper to Vancouver is 8 hours, so we had planned a quick overnight stay in Kamloops, British Columbia. Vancouver was also a brief visit with friends and a trip to Redwood Park to explore the woods there, which were full of fairy houses that there was no shortage of. Before long, we were headed home from Canada back into the United States.